The night my mother confessed everything. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. And I felt nothing. Not relief, not anger, just this hollow, echoing quiet where 32 years of love used to live. My name is Claire Whitfield. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a yellow house on Birchwood Lane in Columbus, Ohio, with a mother who smelled like lavender soap, a father who wore the same green cardigan every Sunday, and a sister named Danielle who was, according to everyone who ever met her, absolutely perfect. I was 3 years old when my parents brought Danielle home. I don't remember the day itself. I've only seen the photographs. In every single one of them, I'm standing slightly to the side, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear, looking somewhere off camera. And Danielle is in my mother's arms, wrapped in a yellow blanket, and both my parents are smiling so wide it looks like their faces might split open. I used to think I was just a serious child. It took me 3 decades to understand I was already being pushed out of the frame. Danielle was beautiful in that effortless way that made people stop, mid-sentence when she walked into a room. Dark curls, green eyes, a laugh that sounded like something from a movie. She was charming without trying, funny without being cruel, and she had this magnetic warmth that pulled every single person in our family toward her like gravity. I was none of those things. I was quiet and bookish with mousy, brown hair and a habit of saying the wrong thing at family dinners. I got straight A's all through school, but my parents never put my report cards on the fridge. Danielle got a C- in sophomore English, and my mother framed the paper where she'd written a paragraph about her favorite season, autumn, she wrote, because everything is changing, but it's still beautiful. My mother called it the most profound thing she'd ever read. I didn't say a word. I just went upstairs, sat on my bed, and stared at the ceiling until my chest stopped hurting. That was life in the Whitfield house. Danielle was the sun. I was Pluto, technically part of the same system, but so far out on the edges that sometimes people forgot I was there at all. Every toxic family has a set of unspoken rules. You don't learn them from being told. You learn them from being punished for breaking them. In our house, the rules went like this. Danielle's feelings came first. Always. If Danielle was upset, dinner was canceled. If Danielle was nervous about something, the whole family rearranged its schedule. When she had her dance recitals, both my parents were in the front row with flowers. When I had my debate championship, the one where I placed second in the entire state of Ohio, my dad showed up 40 minutes late because Danielle had wanted him to help her pick out a dress for a party. He came in right as I was walking off the stage. "Did you win?" he asked, slightly out of breath. "Second place," I said. He nodded like I'd told him the weather and said, "That's good, sweetheart," and then checked his phone. I was 16 years old. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that every single year for the next 18 years, until I finally ran out of ways to believe it. Danielle never noticed any of it. Or if she did, she never said so. That was the cruelest part. She wasn't mean to me. She actually loved me in her way. She'd borrow my sweaters, without asking, and leave little notes on my pillow saying, "Sorry, you're the best." She'd drag me to her friends' parties and introduce me as my brilliant sister. With genuine pride, she thought we were close. She had no idea that every time she left a room, the warmth went with her and I was left standing, in the cold wondering what was wrong with me. I spent most of my 20s in therapy working through that question. My therapist, Dr. Anand, was the first person who ever said to me plainly, "Claire, what you're describing is emotional neglect. What happened to you has a name." I cried for 45 minutes straight. My father got sick when I was 29. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, diagnosed in March and gone by November. 8 months. I moved back home for the last 4 of them, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, driving him to chemo, holding his hand in waiting rooms, while my mother sat on his other side and Danielle flew in on weekends and cried beautifully and got all the long goodbye hugs. I was the one emptying the medical waste bins. I was the one calling the insurance company at 7 in the morning, on hold for an hour, fighting for his medication coverage. I was the one who learned what a DNR was and sat with the hospice nurse and asked all the hard questions while my mother stared at the wall and Danielle held her hand. Nobody said thank you. Not once. And I told myself that was fine. I wasn't doing it for gratitude. I was doing it because he was my father and I loved him, and this was what love looked like when it wasn't pretty. He died on a Tuesday, cold gray November morning. The leaves were all gone from the maple tree outside his window. The will reading was 3 weeks later. My parents had a house worth $420,000, a savings account, my father's pension fund, and a small collection of bonds my grandfather had left. Behind, comfortable, not rich, but solid. The kind of financial security that takes a whole lifetime to build. The lawyer read it in a beige office with bad lighting and a clock that ticked too loud. Everything, the house, the savings, the bonds, every single asset went to Danielle. I got my father's watch and a sentence in the will that said, "Claire has always been our independent one. We trust she'll be fine." I sat very still. The clock kept ticking. The lawyer looked at me over his glasses like he was waiting for me to react, and I just didn't. I folded my hands in my lap and nodded and said, "Okay." My mother wouldn't look at me. Danielle reached across and touched my arm and said, "Claire, I'll split everything with you. I promise we'll figure this out." "It's fine," I said. My voice came out completely calm. It's what he wanted. I drove home, walked into my apartment, sat down on the kitchen floor, and didn't move for 2 hours. That was 5 years ago. I want to be honest about what happened in those 5 years, because it's important. I didn't fall apart. That's the thing people expect. I think they expect the betrayed child to spiral, to collapse, to become some cautionary tale. But I'm stubborn in a way that has always been my best and worst quality. So instead of falling apart, I got very, very quiet. I went back to Columbus for holidays. I sat at the dinner table and passed the green beans and answered questions about my job and smiled at the right moments. And every time I drove home afterward, I'd make it exactly 3 exits down the interstate before I had to pull over because I couldn't see through the tears. I stopped calling my mother first. I noticed she didn't call me either. Danielle bought a beautiful house with the inheritance. She invited me to the housewarming party. I went. I brought wine. I stood in the kitchen my father's money had paid for, and I drank the wine, and I smiled and smiled and smiled until my face ached. It was the November after the housewarming, 2 years ago now, when everything finally cracked open. I had driven to Columbus for my cousin Marcus's 40th birthday dinner. A big family event. One of those sprawling things at an Italian restaurant with too many tables pushed together and everyone talking over everyone else. Halfway through the meal, my Aunt Patrice, my dad's older sister, a sharp, silver-haired woman who has never once softened a truth in her life, leaned over to me and said quietly, "How are you really doing, baby girl?" I said what I always said. "I'm fine, Aunt Patrice." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Did your parents ever tell you about the Hendersons?" I had no idea what she was talking about. She watched my face. Something shifted in her expression, something heavy and old, like she'd been carrying a door for years and was finally setting it down. "Come outside with me," she said. We stood in the parking lot in the November cold, and Patrice told me a story I had never heard. In 1989, my parents lost a baby, a little girl, born too early, gone within 2 days. My mother never fully recovered from the grief. She became withdrawn, closed off, and their marriage nearly didn't survive it. They tried for 2 more years to get pregnant and couldn't. That's when they were approached by a family friend named Robert Henderson, who told them he knew a young woman, barely 18, unmarried, in trouble, who was looking for a family for her newborn daughter. No agency, no official adoption. A private arrangement handled quietly, with paperwork that was technically legal but barely. The baby was Danielle. My parents had adopted Danielle privately, informally, and they had never, not once in 32 years, told her, or me. I stood in that parking lot and I couldn't speak. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally managed. Patrice looked down at her hands. "Because Robert Henderson passed away last month, and his daughter, the woman who was Danielle's birth mother, she's been trying to make contact." I drove home that night without going back inside the restaurant. I called my mother at 3 in the morning. She answered on the second ring. Claire, she said. Tell me it's not true. A long silence. It's true, she whispered. I had thought knowing would feel like something breaking. Instead, it felt like something finally making sense. She's not yours, I said. She was never biologically yours, and you still chose her over me. Your actual daughter, every single time. Claire, it wasn't like that. The inheritance, Mom. Tell me what it was like. Another silence. We felt like we owed her something. We wanted her to feel chosen, so you unchose me. I heard her crying then. I love you, Claire. I know you love me, I said. But you didn't fight for me. Not once, not ever. And I needed you to fight for me. I hung up. I didn't call Danielle for 3 days. When I finally called her, she picked up on the first ring. Claire Bear, I was just thinking about you. I need to tell you something. I told her everything. When I finished, the silence went on so long I thought the call had dropped. Danielle, I'm here. Her voice was completely different. I always knew something was different, she said finally. She made a sound that was almost a laugh but wasn't. 32 years, Claire. They let me live 32 years not knowing who I was. And you, God, Claire. What they did to you. What I didn't see. I'm so sorry. I started crying then. It wasn't your fault. It's still not okay. No, I said. It's really not. We cried together on the phone for a long time. Danielle found her birth mother. Her name is Susan and she lives in Dayton. She's a kindergarten teacher with 2 grown sons and a garden, full of tomatoes and those same dark green eyes. The first time Danielle came home from meeting Susan, she called me from the car. She kept me, Danielle said. She kept a photo of me, Claire. I held the phone and let her cry. That's good, I said softly. That's a really good thing, Danielle. Danielle also split the inheritance with me. She transferred half without being asked. My mother and I went to therapy together. She told me things she'd never said in 30 years of being my mother. About the baby they lost. About the fear that she wasn't enough for me because I never seemed to need her the way Danielle did. About how she'd mistaken my independence for not needing love. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. I'm not going to tell you I forgave her completely, because I don't think that would be true. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's more like weather. But I stopped carrying her failure as proof of my own unworthiness. I'm 34 years old and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Pittsburgh with a rescue cat named Gerald. I talk to my mother on Sundays. I talk to Danielle almost every day. Last month, she texted me late on a Thursday night. I've been thinking, she wrote. You were the one who was always really there. Through all of it. And I didn't see it, and I'm sorry. I held my phone in the dark for a long time before I wrote back. You see it now, I said. That's enough. The yellow house on Birchwood Lane sold last spring. Before the closing, my mother asked if I wanted anything from the house. I took 2 things, my father's watch, and a photograph from the hallway. A blurry snapshot from some random summer, the 4 of us in the backyard. I'm the only one looking straight into the lens. I've looked at that photo 100 times since. I've always been here. That was never the problem. The problem was that for a long time, being here wasn't enough to make them look back. It is enough now. It has to be. Because it's the only life I have, and it's mine. And I have stopped waiting for someone else to decide it's worth something. I locked the door of the yellow house for the last time on a Tuesday in April, slid the key under the mat for the realtor, and walked to my car without looking back. The maple tree in the front yard was just starting to bud. Spring again. Everything changing. Still beautiful.